Live from the Washington, D.C. area, it's the Inside Scoop, all the news that our viewers want to know. Now, here's the host.
Welcome to Inside Scoop. I'm your host, Catherine Reed. It might have been a minute since we were last together on Inside Scoop, but I'm back, at least for tonight. Joining me tonight is Delegate Holly Seibold, who represents the 12th House District here in Northern Virginia. Thank you so much, Holly, for being here.
Thank you so much, Catherine. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you again.
So we always have a good time. We've done these shows for so many years on so many subjects, right?
We have.
So we've got the band back together again.
Yes.
So it's Women's History Month. So this is the beginning of the last week of Women's History Month. So I think it's very appropriate that you and I are talking about basically your new role as a delegate in the House of Delegates. It's your second session. But I want to walk our viewers through where you started back in 2015 and how you ended up sitting in the House of Delegates, because it's a fascinating story, and I think it's very representative of how many women in our legislature and in other elected offices find their way from where they start to sitting at the table in the room where it happens. So 2015.
Yes. In 2015, I started a nonprofit organization called BRAWS, B-R-A-W-S. It stands for Bringing Resources to Aid Women's Shelters. I had read an article about some volunteers up in New Jersey who were working with Just for Success, and they spoke with some of the members of Just for Success, and they said, is there anything else that you need that you're not able to access? And they said, well, having the suit is great to prepare me for my job, but I don't have undergarments and I don't have menstrual supplies. And it got me thinking, wow, I'd never really considered that before. And I started looking around my area to see if there was an organization I can work with, donate products to, and there was nothing. And so I decided to host my own events and collect items. And that day, it was January of 2015, we were able to collect over 100 pads and tampons, over 100 bras and underwear, and I proceeded to donate them to several different shelters in the area. And actually, funny enough, today, 9 years ago, March 25th, I actually handed out my first distribution.
Your first distribution.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing about that, you were doing it out of your house, out of your garage, and your two children from the beginning. Now they're like, imagine 9 years is a long time in the life of a child.
Right.
So now I understand that your daughter Morgan is actually driving a car.
Yes.
So that's pretty astonishing for me personally.
Yes.
But back then, 9 years ago, she was a child, and so was your son. But all of them, you have normalized for young people the fact that this is a normal part of life. That these supplies are necessary, just like having soap and toilet paper in public restrooms. These are necessary for women and girls, and so. To me, how you have brought forward this issue, how you advocated starting 9 years ago was great for this entire community, because that's how I met you. That's how a lot of people met you. And you were actually working with the General Assembly because this specific issue ended up becoming 3 separate bills.
Yes, it did. Right. That first distribution was at a shelter house, which was a domestic violence shelter, and we proceeded to provide direct services to another 100 shelters after that first distribution. And then at some point, I started wondering, why is it such a challenge for people to access these items? And did my research and tried to read, started to do my research looking through Virginia Code, and I come to find out that they're taxed heavily. They're not provided, and they're not mandated to be provided in schools. Prisons and jails were charging a fortune for women to access these products. And so to me, we were doing great work at the time. We were distributing to thousands and millions of women by the end, and but more needed to be done. In addition to the direct service piece, we needed to work on public policy. Public policy must reflect the needs of women and girls, and that was my goal. And so I started doing a lot of advocacy work at the time, trying to change the law, and we were very successful.
You were, and you actually took young women, teenagers,
yes,
tweens,
yep,
with you, not just down to Richmond to testify, but to Capitol Hill to testify.
Yeah.
And I remember hearing legislators remark that these young people were so confident in speaking about something that older people, like of my generation,
Yep.
like, you don't talk about periods, like
Yeah.
you act like they don't exist. You
Right.
don't talk about menstrual hygiene products because they don't exist. But these young women, these girls, were advocating for
Yeah.
themselves. And so they basically forced the issue in public rooms in front of microphones and adults.
Right, the students testified on Capitol Hill. They testified in front of the DC Council people. We were actually successful there. We were able to change the law so that the tax was removed in DC. They went and testified down in Richmond, told their story about what it is like to be in middle school and get your period and not have access to these products. Really proud that women who were formerly incarcerated also, you know, that was a vulnerable time in their lives, but they made it a priority to make sure that they were going and testifying as well, and letting our legislators know what it's like to get your period in jail and not have access as well to the supplies that they need. So I think having those voices loud in different situations we were able to really change the culture. You know, sometimes these situations were the first time these words had ever been uttered in the walls of, you know, Congress or the General Assembly.
Yeah.
And so it actually changed the culture. It changed the conversation and ended up changing policy as well.
And you made a lot of relationships, and one of them was with Jennifer Boysko.
Yes.
And the whole what was it? She tried to call it the Dignity Act.
Yeah, it was called the Dignity Act.
And she was just derided for calling it the Dignity Act.
Yeah, right.
But in sometimes things don't happen the first time around. Like chipping away at that tax.
Yeah.
And again, there are things that are not taxed, like dandruff shampoo.
Right.
But these products, which are already expensive to begin with,
Right.
were taxed.
Yeah, very heavily, 6%. That makes a huge difference for those who, you know, can't even afford the product to begin with.
Right, and so so those relationships you formed and the progress that you made brought you to this moment when your representative, your delegate, Mark Keem,
Yes.
decided to take a job in the administration.
Yeah, you know, it was a fantastic opportunity. I had worked with Mark also many years on these issues. He was really supportive. He introduced many of the bills on the House side when Senator Boysko moved over to the Senate. You know, we had a great relationship, and so when he stepped down, he encouraged me to run for that seat. And you know, obviously, as a mom, I also had a full-time job. It was something I needed to really think about, but. You know, the impact I can make as a legislator was a no-brainer, and I jumped on the opportunity right away.
Well, and I just think it's interesting to examine how women make the decision to run for office.
Yes.
Right? Because it is very intimidating.
It is.
Nobody asks a man when they decide to run for office who's going to take care of their kids.
Right.
Like, well, how are you going to manage a job and your children and your household and your marriage?
Right.
No one asks men that.
No,
But women, it's kind of
unfortunately.
like, well, my God, you've got children, so
Yeah.
how's that going to work?
Oh yeah, I mean, honestly, my husband, this was after COVID, so my husband's job situation changed a bit. He didn't have to be in the office anymore, and so now he was working from home and was able to pick the kids up and, you know, drive carpool and whatnot. And so if it wasn't for COVID and, you know, the new where many people are working remotely, I probably wouldn't have been able to do it because I was the primary driver of our children. And so just, you know, making sure your viewers are aware, when our legislature is only in session from January to March, 60-day sessions or 45-day sessions, and so I would live down there, which is why it's really
Right.
important to make sure that
You've got another primary parent
yes, exactly.
to take care of that.
Yeah.
But you jumped on it, so you were aware that he was resigning. There was obviously more than one candidate, so, and it was a special election. The whole thing was very compressed.
Yes.
Like very compressed in a special election as opposed to like the lead time you have when you're running in a regular. So explain how you jumped and explain all the people that jumped with you.
Oh yeah, I mean, it was just, actually, it was a wonderful experience. You know, I had been doing so much advocacy work in the community for so long. In addition to my work at Bras, I also was very active with my daughter's softball league and my son's baseball league and swim team. And so, you know, a lot of those parents knew how hard I can work and how important it was for me to give back to the community. And so, you know, it was a matter of just reaching out to them and letting them know I want to do what I'm already doing as a citizen advocate, as a, you know, community organizer, as a parent, but I want to do it officially in Richmond for you. And very quickly they jumped on board.
And I think that's amazing too, because parents with school-age children are some of the busiest people on planet Earth. So to get them to pay attention to the fact that their attention, they need to show up, they need to help, they need to vote, they need to be there. That was tough, but you did it. And I think that this new electorate, if you will, made the difference in the fact that you prevailed in that first special election.
Yeah, you know, just being down in session this year, looking around, I mean, it's a whole new type of elected official. I mean, many people have the same background as I do. I'm a former teacher myself. Before I got involved in the nonprofit sector, there's several teachers, several school board members who are now elected. There's a lot of community organizers. It's not just, you know, General Assembly full of lawyers like it used to be, or executives. It's really people who are very grassroots and hands-on.
And very reflective. And I mean, I think the redistricting, because we did pass a constitutional amendment for nonpartisan redistricting, which totally changed. That's why you're in HD 12 now.
Yes.
Is because all that changed. But it also created an opportunity because people were thrown into districts together. Some people retired. After many decades, people retired, which created this opportunity for different kinds of people, including younger people, people from various backgrounds. We have parents with young children. We've actually had women in the last 10 years who gave birth while they were in elected office. That's new in the last 10 years. That didn't happen before. So you look at the legislature, and you showed me a picture earlier. You look at the Democratic representation, and it looks like Virginia. I mean, you look like Virginia in your community, and I'm sure a lot of people feel that that representation is why they want you there, representing the things they care about.
Yeah, and you know, I think about that every day. I'm down in Richmond, and each time I take a vote, I'm thinking about the people I represent. You know, I'm not there for, you know, the publicity, for the money. I mean, nobody
works for the money. We'll cover that in a different segment, but nobody's down there for that.
No, I am there to literally represent my constituents and vote in the way that they would like to see me vote, and introduce legislation that is a priority to them. So it's really proud to be able to you know, accept that position.
Well, I think we're going to talk in our next segment about how you do create a bill and how your constituents reach out to you and how that all works. So please join us after this break. We are here with Holly Seibold talking about how bills get made down in Richmond. So join us, please.
So I just moved in with this family, and it's embarrassing. The little one, he likes to go outside and crawl around in the giant litter box. I don't know what he's doing. I mean, I was born and I knew how to use the litter box. Look at that. That's disgusting. Oh, poop already. You're making me nervous. Oh, okay, I can't look at this anymore. I really hope he grows out of this, for his sake.
So how was work?
It was 1,300 hours. My math class from 302 was in the trenches. Davy Roth had it the worst. Fractions were coming at him left and right. He just didn't get the damn things. 2 days ago, I tried to teach him what 1/4 of 1/2 was using different sizes of blocks. Yesterday, I tried again by dividing up pizza. Both missions failed.
Oh, no.
But today, I was ready. I created a combat math game where the only way to beat the enemy is to out-fraction them. Davy conquered every last denominator. My game was so successful, the principal is deploying it to math squadrons all over the school.
Anywho, how was your day?
Oh, today my boss treated the office to salad wraps.
Salad wraps.
I know.
150 over 90.
180 over 111.
160 over 110. I had a stroke.
This is what high blood pressure looks like. You might not feel its symptoms, but the results from a stroke are far from invisible or silent. If you've come off your treatment plan, get back on it or talk with your doctor to create an exercise, diet, and medication plan that works for you. Go to loweryourhbp.org.
If I would have followed a treatment plan, I would not be in this situation.
We're back to the Inside Scoop. Here again, your host.
Welcome back to Inside Scoop. I'm your host, Catherine Reed, and joining me tonight is Delegate Holly Seibold from the 12th House District here in Northern Virginia. We are celebrating the last week in Women's History Month. And so it's very important to talk about how women have decided to step up, represent their communities in the House of Delegates in Virginia's General Assembly. And we were talking a little bit about how you have engaged with your community, how people stepped up.
Yeah.
And so talk a little bit now about how you translate that engagement with your constituency into how bills get made, how public policy is formed.
Yeah.
How do you take to Richmond during 45 or 60 days the things that your community has told you are problems they want to see solved?
I mean, that is my favorite part of the job, is meeting with my constituents. If someone reaches out, and I encourage my constituents to reach out, we usually get together and have a conversation about their issue. There's a wide range of issues that people care about. This session, I heard last year, prior to this session, I heard from a lot of constituents about the problem of invasive plants and invasive species in our community. I have some constituents who spend the entire weekend along the WOND trail, literally pulling invasive species out of the ground.
Porcelainberry and ivy,
yes.
And yes, I know them. They're all over the city of Fairfax as well. They're eating everything and they're felling trees.
Yeah, they are, and so many people are dedicating hours to eradicating this issue. And so they invited me multiple times to go on walks with them. And I was shocked that so many people are dedicating so much time to this issue. Also, they've presented me with a lot of research. I mean, it was shocking to me the amount of money that we as taxpayers spend trying to
beat back this problem.
Yeah, and it was just really incredible. I never really knew much about it, and I guess that's because a lot of people are already doing the work. And so I said, what can we do policy-wise to help find a solution to this problem? And so I did a little research, and in Maryland, they have little signs that they put up at nurseries and at landscape businesses that kind of they're educational signs, and it basically tells consumers this plant, if they're like looking at the English ivy, for example, says this plant is invasive. Here's some information, and it has a QR code that sends you to their state resource, and then it says ask about alternatives. So it's not banning the sale of invasives. I mean, although, if you ask me, we should start banning.
I think that could be a natural progression.
Yes, but let's starting slowly, at least. Let's start educating consumers, because as I said, we already have so many invasive species already that are so prevalent. Let's at least try to keep more people from planting them. And so this sign seemed like a great option for me, and something that I think there is no fiscal impact on our budget. So it was, to me, a great solution to our problem. And my constituents were on board with it, and so we worked on the language. They brought it to my attention, maybe in August, which is always the best time for our constituents to bring you their ideas, because you have several few months to work on it, because January 1st, all the bills are due. And so we worked on it, went back and forth. I thought we got great language. And once it got to Richmond, there was a lot of back and forth between the stakeholders, conservationists, versus the
nursery people who sell the plants.
Yeah, and the agribusiness. So we actually, in the end, by March, we came to a compromise, and the legislation did pass. And the conflict was, do we put the sign on the door? Do we put it by the plants? Is this a burden? So there was a lot to consider, and I listened to all the stakeholders, but we thought the best path was to put them at the plants. And this was a great strategy to educate consumers before they purchase, because the common person doesn't know what an invasive species is. And like if they had learned about that, maybe they would, decide to purchase a different plant. So it's sitting on the governor's desk right now, and fingers crossed he'll sign it.
So bamboo is another invasive plant,
Yes.
and a lot of people plant it as a screening, but then it takes over, and it's difficult to eradicate bamboo. It takes over everything. And so I can understand that people see it in their neighborhoods, just like people see English ivy, like literally growing up trees, all the way to the tops of trees, and don't understand that just, snipping the ivy at the bottom is a really simple way to it saves the trees.
Because the ivy and other invasives are literally suffocating the trees.
And the weight of it, will take down a tree.
Yeah.
But again, education I think is a good starting point for that. But again, people have to come to you with the idea.
Yes.
People come down and they testify, right? They come down and they testify in subcommittee hearings about.
That. They stuck with me the entire process. They came down and testified. Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about some of your other bills. So you've got this one, it's sitting on the governor's desk. Fingers crossed that it will be. But what were some of the other things that you did this session?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm really proud of the prison reform, criminal justice reform bills that I introduced this session. I had several of them. Some of them we had to carry over to 2025 because they just weren't ready for prime time yet. But 3 of them in particular made it through the House and the Senate with bipartisan support. One was a safe harbor bill. So if you were overdosing outside, I can report that overdose without any criminal prosecution. Okay, our goal is to keep people alive. So that means we can get you Narcan and you can survive. But in the past, people were afraid to report because of the criminal.
They would be implicated, right?
They could be implicated
and I know that this
issues.
has been for young people especially, because when young people find themselves in a situation where clearly somebody's in distress, but they're afraid to call because they will get in trouble.
Right, so we want to encourage people to call and report. And so now those safe harbor privileges do exist on the street, in homes. However, they don't exist right now in prisons and in jails. And actually, our prisons and jails are flooded recently. Have been flooded with fentanyl and other opioids. And so what we would like to have done was extend those safe harbor privileges to prisons and jails. And so we did have bipartisan support. It did make it to the governor. Unfortunately, it did not. He vetoed it. He had a lot of pressure. The DOC was on board with it, but the sheriffs were still a little bit uncomfortable with the bill, so he ended up vetoing the bill.
And I can kind of understand the struggle there, just because there shouldn't be drugs in jails and prisons.
Right.
So to offer sanction is kind of like, but where are they coming from?
Right.
So I can understand to a certain degree the benefits of the safe harbor, and also the fact that you're saying, but we still need to cut off the source of where they're coming from.
Of course,
so,
but argument is, dead people don't
telltales.
So if we can't save that person, you'll never get information about the origin of the drugs.
Good point.
So our goal is really just to save lives and make sure that they're able to report it, and then you can use. There was no regulations against using the evidence. So we're just hoping to do that, and we'll return, and we're going to continue to work with the sheriffs and DOC throughout the year and seeing how we can really stop the number of deaths that we're seeing in our prisons and jail system. Another bill that I was really proud of was HB 45. So in 2020, before I was there, the General Assembly passed the earned sentence credit. And basically it's saying that if you exhibit good behavior and you work the programs while you're in prison and jail, you can get time off early. So basically it's to encourage people to really practice great behavior while they're in prison and reform themselves through programs. And so this is a great program, it has been successful. In fact, 4 prisons have closed down in the last couple of years because so many people are being released early because of earned sentence credit. And so the part that was missing was pre-trial detention. So basically, you want to encourage people also to participate in the jail system. And so some people could be in jail for 5 years and waiting to transfer to DOC, and they they're not getting credits for their time, for their
time served.
If they're behaving and doing the program. So this bill was simply a clarification to the already existing earned sentence credit bill. You know, I was hearing from so many people who are incarcerated, hearing from their families, their loved ones, very excited about this because, you know, they had done what they were asked to do, but they weren't getting their credit. And unfortunately, it was interpretation of the Attorney General who made the decision not to include the jail time. So unfortunately, the governor, he, you know, took the Attorney General's opinion over the General Assembly's passage of the bill and vetoed it. So well, it puts me in mind of the STAR program, which is what Sheriff Stacey Kincaid is doing in Fairfax County Jail. And so I went on a tour with some members of Congress and talked to these men who are participating voluntarily. They're doing an enormous amount of work. And they're making great strides. Like they're investing in the skills necessary to get out, to reintegrate, they're connected with their families. They're doing so much work. And you're basically saying, though, they don't get credit for that. And that would be a perfect example of the time that they have put into early release.
So what happens when a bill does not pass, or in this case it gets vetoed? Because there's several things that can happen to bills, right? Because they get laid by.
Yes.
Or you said something earlier about, well, not ready for prime time, right? So they get laid by, and but they can reappear in some other form in some other year. So when something doesn't get signed or it's not successful this year, it doesn't mean it's gone forever.
Right. Well, so many of the bills were laid on the table to 2025.
Yeah.
So essentially, I'm sorry, they weren't laid. They were carried over to 2025. Right. So if they're carried over, they're going to pop up in the 2025ve session initially. If they're laid on the table, that means that they're pretty much dead for them.
Then they have to be resurrected.
They have to be
literally resurrected from the dead.
They need a sponsor, a patron to put it in again in 2025. Veto is different because it was basically passed by the House, passed by the Senate. And then passed into law by the General Assembly, but it's still, different branches of government. The governor always has the opportunity to veto it, amend it, or sign it. In that situation, he vetoed both. He could have amended it, but he chose not to. And I should also mention, I did have a third bill that was signed by the governor. And so this was another bill that I was really excited about, and I worked on a bipartisan basis with several of the Republican delegates. Shout out to Delegate Michael Webert, who initially worked with me on this bill.
Yeah.
And we ended up passing, and I could tell you more about it.
Absolutely.
After the commercial break.
After the commercial break. We are going to go to a brief commercial break, and then we're going to come back and talk further with Delegate Holly Seibold about what she's worked on, what has gotten passed, and what she expects to do going forward. So join us after the break.
Every day across America, excess food is gathered by a network of good people at local food banks, giving hope to millions of children who struggle with hunger. They've earned their wings, and you can too. Together, we can solve child hunger. Support Feeding America and your local food bank at feedingamerica.org.
Hi, I'm Josh Temple. You might have seen me on TV where I help folks turn their houses into dream homes. But forget construction. Parenting is the toughest job there is. So when you need help or advice, turn to the parenting experts at Boys Town.
I was afraid of that.
Well, guess it's time to get you fixed.
Your pets will start fooling around sooner than you think.
Go on, get out of here!
Accidental litters lead to millions killed in shelters each year. Help prevent more. Fix at month 4.
Food. It nourishes, brings us together, and adds flavor to life. That's why it's important to wash hands, surfaces, and fresh produce. Keep raw meat, poultry, and seafood separate from ready-to-eat foods like fruits and vegetables. And cook to proper temperatures using a food thermometer. Enjoy, and refrigerate leftovers within 2 hours. For more tips on safely preparing foods, visit homefoodssafety.org.
We're back to the Inside Scoop. Here again, your host.
Welcome back to Inside Scoop. I'm your host, Catherine Reed. We are talking to Delegate Holly Seibold from the 12th House District here in Northern Virginia. We are in the last month of Women's History Month, and I think it's a perfect time to talk about all the things that you are doing and how, in fact, some of the things that you do are because you have a different perspective. You were getting ready to tell us about one of the bills that got passed that you are the most proud of.
Right, and I should actually, going back to Women's History Month, I should mention the reason I got involved in prison reform in the first place was, you know, back to what we talked about in the beginning of the show, where we were working with women at I don't think I
Friends
mentioned
of
it,
Guest
Friends
House.
of Guest House, which is an amazing nonprofit organization.
They
based
just
in
got a
Alexandria.
very big grant
They
from
did.
Mackenzie Scott.
$1 million.
I know. I'm so excited for Friends of Guest House.
Them. But they were rock stars at the time when we needed them. They would advocate for change in the prisons, and so that was a little bit of a taste I had about how our prisons are functioning. So this session, of course, I had the two bills that I mentioned, HB 45, which was earned sentence credit, and then the Safe Harbor bill. Unfortunately, as I mentioned before, the commercial, they both were vetoed. However, I had another bill that was successful and signed by the governor last week. And so I read an article back in September maybe, from Hannah Beckler from Business Insider, and she had done a FOIA DOC and found out that Virginia's the attack canines that are in Virginia's prisons were biting more inmates than any other state in the entire country.
Really?
Yes, and so we were an extreme outlier. 92% of the bites in our prisons, 92% of bites in all prisons throughout America were happening here in Virginia. 92%. Over the last 5 years, there had been nearly 300 bites.
Wow.
Yeah, some of them were very, very severe, and some people had some serious consequences as a result of those bites. We heard stories of people who were in wheelchairs, who were permanently disfigured. It was pretty horrific, and so I reached out to her after reading that to see what we could do, and she was very excited to support us in our quest to ban canines from Virginia prisons. And when I say cans, I'm not talking about the drug sniffing dogs. No.
You're talking about like the German shepherds that people see in those movies from the war.
Right.
Yeah.
They're attacking, and they do have they have been used in the past during the civil rights movement.
I know.
They are very racially charged. It's during slavery, so they do exist. They existed in a time they were used to attack. They're not there to,
These are not drug sniffing dogs.
Right. So
they are used for behavior modification.
Right. So I want to be very clear about the kind of dogs we're talking about. And so I reached out to another delegate, Michael Weber, who I mentioned before the commercial as well, who also who saw the article. He had already reached out to the Interfaith Center, which is
Virginia Interfaith, right?
Virginia Interfaith, which is an active group in the area of people of all different faiths who want to see change. And they were on this article. Mike was on the article already, and now, obviously I was interested. And so him and I worked really closely together. I should mention he's a Republican. And he and I worked very closely together to put together language that we thought, both sides could support, because in general this was just good policy. It was good, so it was great teamwork on a bipartisan basis, which it made me really happy they were able to do this, and we from that day on, we put the legislation in. I was a sponsor, he was a co-sponsor of the bill. he worked with the governor's office. I worked with the Democrats in the House and the Senate, and we were able to get it out unanimously from both chambers, and the governor signed it.
That's really really a feat, because just for our viewers' knowledge, you know, a bill starts in the House or a bill starts in the Senate, and sometimes they have companion bills and sometimes they don't. So if you have a bill in the House and it gets passed, it crosses over. So during crossover, it then goes to the Senate, and you have to hope that the people on the Senate side are going to be like, oh, that bill, that one. So, you know, finding your partners in the other chamber becomes really important too.
Yeah. No, we didn't have a companion bill in the Senate, which was a little nerve-wracking because we had to get all the support from the House sponsors, but we were able to get a few to sign up, for the few senators to sign on to the bill be our champions on that side of the building.
Well, they must have done a good job if it was unanimous.
Yeah, they did, and just really proud of this legislation. And we had so many people from the community come and speak out, lots of formerly incarcerated men who came to Richmond and testified. And this was, I'm sure it was not an easy thing for them to do, to talk about their prison experience, but they talked about why these dogs cause so many problems. I should say we did compromise. They're not banned completely, because we also worked with DOC and we also worked with the sheriff's office, who had their priorities as well. So it's unfortunate because I'd like to see a ban, but it was important for me to compromise. So basically, it's scaled back significantly. So before they were using, especially the canines, to extract inmates from their prison cell, and that was actually the majority of the cases we heard about, where inmates already were laying flat on the ground, and they didn't want to come out for whatever reason, and then they throw the dogs in there who would bite them until they left. So they're not allowed to use them in those situations anymore. They can only use them, this is the argument that DOC had made, is like, if there's a big fight, a big riot, we're putting inmates at danger if we don't have this as a tool. Again, most states don't use this as a tool, but I wasn't going to keep arguing that point. But they cannot deploy the dogs if there's not 3 or more people involved in a fight. So it has to be a significant group of inmates who are fighting before they'll deploy them. And they also, now we put a chain of command in place, so they can't just deploy them either because they think it's a bad situation. They have to get permission from a warden before they're used. So lots of guardrails in place, and so we're hoping to see those numbers drop significantly now that this is the law.
It's interesting that there's a watchdog group that actually knew that 92% were in Virginia.
Yeah,
so somebody's watching.
Right.
And you mentioned Virginia Interfaith, which does a lot of work they do great work on prison reform, but they have worked so hard to try to reduce or eliminate the use of solitary confinement.
They've done great work.
But it's just we're not there yet.
No, actually, but I had another bill I introduced was actually something that was a bill that Virginia Interfaith also supported. So, just to transition to the other example of the great work they're doing. So they FOIA'd and found out all the information about the dogs, but they also FOIA'd the poultry industry and in a couple other industries in Virginia that had child labor violations. And they found out that the number of child labor violations are at the highest point right now, the highest they've been since the 1930s, when they eradicated child labor. And they're guessing it's due to COVID, staffing shortages. And so they found out that children, and there was also a New York Times article about this, that children were working in these factories, operating heavy machinery. One child had his arm sliced by one of the machines, and he was working late at night. He was tired. So there's all kinds of violations happening, and they had all the data to prove it. So they brought this bill to my attention as well, and I also had read this New York Times article. So between the two pieces, I was like, this is something I definitely want to carry. And we were able to. They hadn't increased the penalty and the fines for many, many years. Probably for about 50 years. So the numbers, even with inflation, the numbers were very low. And so we increased the penalty. We increased it almost 3 times the amount that it was. It was at $10,000, I believe, and we increased it to $25,000. for their first offense, and then there's subsequent fines as well afterwards. And we also, which was very important to me, put in a clause in the legislation that said not only do we need to increase fines for those who are exploiting children, but we also need to make sure the children are aware of their rights, because unfortunately in Virginia we don't have a lot of inspectors to go and find out where these child labor violations are coming from. But shout out to our leaders who put together the budget. They did give us more money this session for child labor violations, so we'll have a few more people on staff to do that. But it was up to the local people to report it. It was up to the kids to report it when they were being exploited, or the
But
parents.
they're not going to do that because it's a loss of income.
It is, and a lot of these kids were migrant workers,
Right.
supporting their families, sending the money home, and they need these jobs. So we're not saying that you can't have the job. We want you, if somebody needs to work, then they shall work, but you need to do it within the law, which says it has to be a certain amount of hours each week. It cannot be around heavy machinery. If the kid wants to work in the office in a safe environment, fine. But it can't be in dangerous situations, and it can't be over a certain amount of hours a week, and it can't be in the middle of the night when they're tired. So that's the conversation that we started this year. I'm really looking forward to coming back next year and continuing it. I'm proud of our legislation. I'm proud of Virginia, because there's been data throughout the country right now that's showing that actually many states are slowly chipping away at child labor laws, and because of this urgent need to increase our staffing. But Virginia, on the other hand, as long as the governor does not veto it and signs it, Virginia, on the other hand, is now putting increasing penalties for child labor violations, and that is the direction that we want to move Virginia forward.
And again, this, over 1,000 bills got passed. That doesn't mean 1,000 bills are going to be signed into law, but 1,000 bills passed. And I'm sure people wonder, how in the world do you think of 1,000 things that need a solution? But you're telling us right here, invasive plants and dogs in prisons and child labor, that we are not running out of things that need to be resolved. There are real problems that need real solutions.
Right.
And the work that you are doing, and 140 people in our legislature, this is what everyone's doing back in their home districts. They're talking to their constituents to find out what is the issue. And when it comes to child labor, we have to assume too that using child labor is cheaper. And that is the other reason that companies and factories and agriculture want to hire children, is because it's cheap labor.
Right, and it's not just, like in the movies, and as I described, the poultry industry, it's not these big companies either. I mean, there was just violations up the street that I read about and I won't name the name of the local sandwich shop that was using children, and they were violating the law by using them at the wrong hours of the day.
Yeah,
and they were using
hours.
And too many hours, and they were using very dangerous supplies. Equipment. So this is local. This is a very local issue.
I can tell that it is, and it's important that we've got people who are listening to their constituencies.
Yeah.
So when we come back from this last break, we are going to continue to talk with Holly Seibold, who is the delegate from the 12th House districts here in Northern Virginia, including Vienna, to talk about, some of the things that she's looking forward to once this veto session is over in April. So please join us after the break.
Nice going, Spencer. I can't believe we broke Old Man Hennessy's window.
Correction, dude. You broke. I just threw the ball.
This is really bad. What are we gonna do?
We?
Go to the door, ask for the ball back. Are you serious?
It's my ball, Myrtlebeck.
You so dead. I'd run away.
Yeah, to Uruguay.
Kiss your life goodbye. Sorry.
Let's go.
See you, dude.
See ya. You got me in your well.
Nice one. Some friends you are.
Keep smiling, keep shining.
Hi. Tell him it was an accident. And we can fix the window. Come on. I'll come with you.
Loyalty. Pass it on.
You go first.
A message from the Foundation for a Better Life.
One day these rats were playing in the woods. Well, it's a matches and that's no good. Listen to smoke before you give it a try. Only you. Don't play with matches. Don't play with fire.
prevent wildfires. Fire!
Awkward. I'm the awkward silence. You try to avoid me, then there I am again.
But an awkward silence can be a great thing.
Like Kelly here is about to demonstrate.
You haven't really been yourself lately. Are you okay?
Find out how you can help a friend with their mental health at seizetheawkward.org.
We're back to the Inside Scoop. Here again, your host.
Welcome back to Inside Scoop. I'm your host, Catherine Reed, and I'm talking with Delegate Holly Seibold tonight here in the last week of Women's History Month. And we are talking about some of the things she has worked on in Richmond this year. And I just want to pivot a little bit and talk with Holly about what she does in her district when you're not in Richmond. So you've got one more session, the veto session in April.
Right.
But the rest of the time, how do you spend your days?
That's a great question. Right, April 17th, we head back to Richmond, and we discussed a lot on the show today about the amendments and the vetoes and the bills that passed.
And there's the budget
and
hanging
then
out there.
The budget's also hanging out there. Now we could, so the governor vetoes a bill. And if we have two-thirds vote, if we have the votes, we need two-thirds of the population in the House to overturn a veto. So
Right.
we could; those are our options. You can accept or reject the amendments that the governor offers. So there's a lot that we do down there, and we, finish up the budget. So that's really my main responsibility when session is over, and unless there's some sort of situation where they call you back down. But otherwise, I'm here in the district, and my goal really is to be at as many events as I possibly can, particularly in my district.
Well, that's good news for me, because then I run into you too.
Yeah.
So I run into you at the Arc of Northern Virginia breakfast. We ran at the Brain Injury Services ribbon cutting. So I get to see you because we both work in the nonprofit world.
Right. And when I ran for office, that was a priority of mine, to be a voice of nonprofits, to really showcase the work that they do, because so many of them are doing just the work in our community and get no recognition for it.
I call it the heavy lifting of humanity.
They do. And many of those nonprofits don't have the capacity to advocate down in Richmond. And so it's important, for me at least, that I attend these events and that I'm there and I can, I'm taking notes. A lot of the times these events that I'm invited to have speakers who are directly impacted by the work that the nonprofit's doing. So I'm taking notes, making sure that this is on my radar. So if I do have legislation, there's people I can call. And as you mentioned, the Arc of Northern Virginia does such great work, but they also, they're really great about advocating.
They are.
Lucy Beanell is amazing.
Very organized.
And so a lot of them, I wanted to come to that event because I saw so many of those faces when I was in Richmond this session, and they were advocating for those with disabilities.
Right.
And they do great work. We were able to actually, going back to the budget, we were able to fully fund the waivers.
Yeah, the Medicaid waivers.
The Medicaid waivers. So they were really, really excited to talk about that this session. So it was great to be there and see them. That same day, they were opening up in my district the
Brain Injury Services.
And
they moved from Springfield into your district.
It's such a great resource for your listeners. If you have any type of brain injury, you can go and get resources and services for free. And how great now is it in my district, because people don't have to commute down to Springfield. It's right here. I've known the folks at the Stroke Center, which is also in Vienna for a while.
Stroke Comeback Center.
Yes,
yep.
and
I've done a show with them.
Oh, they're great too, and they were actually at the opening because they're super excited that this resource is also available to their clients. So there was a lot of synergy there that day, and I was really excited to see them now in Vienna. I try to attend these ribbon cutting ceremonies or any events where the actual person who's receiving the services is there to speak.
And you're right about one thing too, is that a lot of nonprofits don't have the resources, the bandwidth to advocate, but a lot of them are also reluctant because they think that doing advocacy is lobbying and that it could endanger their 501c3 status.
Right.
So having elected show up is having the person come to you.
Right.
without you having to jeopardize your
Right.
resources to because I know I work with so many nonprofits who are like that we can't do it, but we need the help because we need better public policy to support our work.
Their voices are so critical. They are essential, and that's why I try to again show up, because not only am I taking notes, I'm documenting, I'm taking pictures, putting it in my newsletter, putting it on social media, trying to share information about this resource, about this nonprofit, so maybe people will donate or if
volunteer.
Volunteer.
Like I didn't realize of the Brain Injury Services that people can volunteer at their ADAPT clubhouse to help people through their recovery and rehabilitation. People can volunteer. I would never have occurred to me.
Right, and so I try to have as many people in my district and outside my district on my newsletter recipient list, and so by me sharing that, I send it out every week. I'm hoping to help out the nonprofits, and also if you not only to volunteer, maybe to donate, but also if you need that service, now you know it's there.
That it's there in your district.
Yeah.
So you've got some heavy hitters in your district. One of them is the Women's Center, which has been around for a very long time.
They do such great work.
Yeah.
Right. This was their 50th anniversary, and this year, 2024, and I was really honored to give them a commending resolution in Richmond. They actually came down to Richmond this session, and we were able to, I stood up on the floor, and they stood up as well in the gallery, and we were able to do that in front of the entire General Assembly, in front of the House. It was a really great, wonderful moment, and they deserve that recognition for all they do in the community to help those with mental health who need mental health services.
They've been around for a long time, and there have been a lot of alumni. My husband, Tom Greason, was like a general counsel to their board for and Dorothy Isaacs has been involved. There's so many people in 50 years who have been engaged in some capacity or other on the board, working with the center to provide these necessary services. And it's important to recognize that work. Doing resolutions is something that elected officials do to recognize the work of people in their community. So what are some of the resolutions and proclamations that you've been able to do this year?
In addition to Women's Center, we gave another commending resolution to an organization that's based in Vienna called Rustic Love, and your viewers may have seen evidence of this organization, which does really amazing work. They have little heart signs that you can put outside your door, and all of those signs were made by volunteers, and the wood was donated. The volunteers created them, and then all the money that they received as a result of selling those signs goes to food insecure families in the Northern Virginia area. And they have raised in just the last couple of years $450,000. They've given it back to Madison High School Pantry, Marshall Pantry, and you name it, and Food for Others, you name it. They have donated so much money to help food insecure families. So I was really honored again to be able to do that. And just to make the connection with the advocacy piece that we were talking about a couple minutes ago about the nonprofits, when they're down in Richmond, because my background is advocacy, I do make that pitch again. I'm like, here's your resolution. It's so great to see you. You do such great work. But what I want to see more of is you coming back next session, and especially the Women's Center, and I need you to be knocking the doors and telling all of the legislators about the mental health issues and how it's severely underfunded. And the same thing to Rustic Love. I said, thank you for coming, here's a resolution, but I need to see you all and your volunteers down here knocking doors, telling the legislators firsthand what you see and the big problem of food insecurity in our community. So those voices are essential, and I love working with them and trying to encourage them, just like to go for a full circle, just like me when I started BRAS, that it wasn't enough just to provide direct services, but we really need to fund these causes. We really need to advocate for these causes so that we see policy change.
And people are welcome in Richmond. I know it's intimidating. There are a lot of people who are like, I've never been to the Capitol, I've never been during session, but you're in a brand new General Assembly building, which was years in the making, and I was down there for the first time and saw it's very beautiful, it's well laid out, it's easy to navigate, there's more parking than there ever has been, so there's lots of reasons to actually go with a group, go with your nonprofit, show up, and actually engage if people have never done that before.
Right, and I do hope, these resolutions, commendations lead to people getting more involved in General Assembly, because back in the day, you only could go in person to watch a committee hearing or to watch the floor. But now we also have, there's so much transparency because thanks to COVID, they installed cameras, and so now everything is streamed, live streamed, so they can watch. If you're involved, like if you're interested in HWI, you know, if you want health, that's health. If you're interested in health issues, you can watch the health committee. If I'm on public safety, so if you want to watch, if you're interested in prison reform or if you're interested in gun reform, you know, you can watch that live stream. And so there's so much, and you can actually not only watch it, but you can call in and testify. You can go on Zoom and testify. You can submit written comments. There's many ways now to get involved and engaged with Richmond than ever before, than when I started back in 2015. So really encouraging people to, you know, you're doing great work in the community. We need to be happy and congratulate you for that. But now let's take it to the next step. You're here in Richmond. What can we do next? How can we change? Really, you know, the policy for that, so that we don't have to rely so much on nonprofits.
Right. And I think you bring up something that is a great thing to sort of wrap up our show with, which is it's never been easier to engage with your local elected. Yes. It's never been easier to look at the streamed committee hearings. Right. It's never been easier to give testimony if you want to. Because I can remember you throwing your kids in the car for 7:30 subcommittee hearings in their pajamas.
They were very young at the time.
Very young, and pajamaed kids, and you're driving them so you can make a 7:30 a.m. meeting, because that was the only option.
I know, but now there are many ways to engage, and I should also mention, we're only there from January to March, but you can also engage, as we mentioned, from April to December.
Right, you're easy to find.
You can find me. The senators are easy to find. We want to hear from people. We really do. I mean, most of the legislation I put forward this session was a result of somebody telling me about a problem and me trying to solve it, right? And so if I don't hear about those problems, then I can't come up with a way to solve it. And so I would encourage all of your listeners to reach out to their delegates as well and senators, because they want to hear from them.
I agree. And again, I think it's important for us to realize that we are the government. All of us like representative democracy, and we all should care about democracy, protecting democracy, supporting democracy in America.
Right.
Because, you know, without that, none of the rest of this makes a whole lot of difference. So being focused on our democracy, but the fact in a representative government, we are the people who have to do the work.
Right.
You represent, but the people have to do the work too.
Yes.
I think that is such an important thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So here, Women's History Month, here we are. I appreciate the fact that you stepped up, you ran, even before you ran, you did the work, and you're encouraging and you are modeling for people in your community how you need them to step up and be part of the solution too.
I do.
Well, thank you so much for being on the show, Holly. I appreciate it very much.
Oh, thank you so much, Catherine. I loved being here.
This is great. And for you at home, thank you so much for joining us here on Inside Scoop as we talk to Delegate Holly Seibold, who is from the 12th House District.